Here are 3 reasons why you should buy the OLED Steam Deck over the LCD model. And the number 1 reason is the screen. And I know everyone says that the screen is super good. And honestly, I didn't think it was going to make that big of a difference before I had the OLED Steam Deck in my hands. But now that I've used it, the screen really is something else. Alright, like check this out. This is the Red Dead 2 benchmark running on both decks at the exact same settings, and let's just freeze frame right here. Look at the difference in the sky color. The OLED, you can see way more stars and way more color gradients, and the silhouettes of the trees look black instead of grayed out, and look at the shadows on this roof here in between the slats. The contrast on the OLED is just insane, and to be honest, the camera doesn't really do it justice. The difference is even more noticeable in person. It makes a huge difference to how games feel and play on the Steam Deck. The OLED screen is bigger at 7.4 inches versus 7 inches, which ends up being about 12% bigger, which doesn't sound like that much, but it actually is a pretty noticeable difference. It's also brighter at a peak of 1000 nits, which is seriously impressive, and it gets dimmer if you want to play in the dark. It has a faster 90 Hz refresh rate, which is awesome for indie games like Dead Cells. And I was thinking to myself, that faster refresh rate is nice, but it's not going to help you in AAA games, but that's actually not true. Let's say you're playing a AAA game and you can get 40 to 45 FPS, which is pretty normal for a lot of AAA games. That's still going to look smoother than the standard LCD Steam Deck because that 40 or 50 FPS that you're getting is actually going to be run at 80 or 90 Hertz respectively, so you're getting 2 refreshes per frame, and it looks much smoother. So even when you're playing more demanding games that can't get 90 FPS, you're still gonna get smoother gameplay. It's more color accurate, and I'm gonna be honest, usually when I hear people talk about color accuracy, I kinda tune out because I just don't care that much. But look at this. This is the red on the LCD Steam Deck, and you can see on Red Dead Redemption, it looks totally fine. But then this is the red on the OLED, and just look how dramatic a difference that is. It has HDR, and right now I'm going through my first playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2. I know I took way too long to get to it, but I am getting to it, and that game supports HDR, and it looks incredible. It has significantly lower input lag according to Digital Foundry, which means when you're using the controller, it's going to feel more responsive. It also has a way better touchscreen with a faster and more responsive touch sampling rate. That means on the old LCD screen, I used to hate using the on-screen keyboard because it would regularly miss my touches. But now on this one, it feels like any modern tablet or smartphone, so it's great to use as a touchscreen. And one thing I've noticed in my daily use is that the old LCD touchscreen, there were a lot of games where I couldn't read the text very easily. And even though the screen isn't that much bigger on the OLED, I still notice that text is almost always easier to read, and that's because of the dramatically increased contrast ratio, which allows you to see the differences between 2 different things, and it makes a huge difference with actually being able to tell what's on the screen. On a technical note, the old LCD screen was a lot thicker than the new OLED screen, so with the new OLED, Valve has more internal volume that they can use for whatever they want. And one of the things they wanted to increase was the battery, and that's number 2 on this list, is they have a dramatically bigger battery. They went from 40 watt hours on the LCD to 50 watt hours on the OLED, which is about a 25% increase, and it makes a big difference. At that same time, they also went from a 7nm process on the old chip to a 6nm process on the new chip, which means the chip is going to run more efficiently, requiring less battery life. It'll produce less heat, which means lower fan curves, and we're gonna get into that more in a second. But what that means in the real world is you get dramatically more battery life out of the OLED versus the LCD. I ran a battery life test using Elden Ring as the benchmark with the same settings on both, a max 15 watt TDP and having the frame rate unlocked, which is kind of your worst case scenario for a battery life test. And the LCD deck got 1 hour and 11 minutes, whereas the OLED deck got 2 hours and 27 minutes. And during that test, the OLED deck was also getting about 10 to 15% more FPS. So if you capped the frame rate, you would see an even bigger difference in battery life. So in practical daily use, the OLED deck really does have over double the battery life of the original and better performance, which is seriously impressive. So now that we finally have the battery life to take the deck with us when we're traveling without being as worried about always being next to an outlet, we gotta keep the deck safe. And while Valve does ship the deck with with a carrying case, this military grade hard shell from the video sponsor TomToc is way better in my opinion. Not only does it fit either the OLED or the LCD deck perfectly, but it also offers more protection at just a fraction of the size. If you try to flex Valve's case, it flexes no problem, and you can push it all the way to the screen. But if you try to bend TomToc's armor case, it has almost no give. It also is splash and dust proof, which gives you one less thing to worry about while you're traveling. Also, if you're someone like me who wants to just throw your deck in your backpack, but you're nervous about it getting beat up, but also you don't want to use Valve's case because that takes up half the backpack, this is the answer. Another thing I like about it is that I can still fit it in my sling bag if I want the extra protection there, whereas Valve's case is no joke, almost as big as the sling bag itself. If you want to check out TomToc's armor case, I'll leave it linked below, and thanks again to TomToc for sponsoring this part of the video. Number 3, the third thing I want to talk about is 1,000 little improvements that all add up to a significantly improved device. And since there are so many things I want to talk about, I'm going to talk as fast as possible to get everything out. So let's go. It has about 5 to 15% better performance depending on the game that you're playing. I was averaging about 10% better performance, and part of that is due to the faster RAM. It used to be 5,500 megatransfers per second, and now it is 6,400. The fans are way quieter, and in my opinion, it's a more pleasant noise because it's a lower thrum versus a higher pitched whine on the LCD. And while the fans are quieter, the whole device stays cooler. For example, while running Elden Ring for over 10 minutes, once everything settles in and the fans are at the same speed, the OLED is running about 10 degrees cooler on the CPU and GPU, meaning if you wanted to set your own custom fan curve, you could reduce the fan speed and get similar thermals as the LCD. But what it means for real day-to-day use is that during a gaming session where you're pushing the Steam Deck hard, the LCD Steam Deck heats up the entire chassis, and it doesn't really get to the controls, but it does heat up the body of the chassis pretty significantly, as you can see on this thermal camera. And on the new OLED, really the only place that you can notice heat at all is through the exhaust. And as long as you point that away from you, then it stays totally cool even while you're pushing it hard, which is seriously fantastic, and that's not something I can say about any other handheld that I've used. It also has Bluetooth 5.3 versus Bluetooth 5.0, and what that means in the real world is that you can use Bluetooth controllers like an Xbox or a PlayStation controller to turn on the Steam Deck remotely. So that means if you want to leave your Steam Deck plugged into the TV and just flop down on the couch and turn on your Xbox controller, it will automatically turn on the Steam Deck and then you're good to go. It basically acts like a regular console now. It also is using faster and more reliable Wi-Fi 6E, and it weighs less. And this on paper doesn't seem like that much. It's like 29 grams lighter, but when you pick it up, every single time I pick it up, I know immediately that I'm holding the OLED versus the old one. And I think it's partly because, yes, it's lighter, but also they redesigned it so that the weight doesn't feel like it's in your hands as much. It kind of feels like it's more towards the middle of the body. Maybe that's because of the bigger battery, but it feels even lighter than what the specs would suggest. The buttons feel better and they feel more clicky, especially the Steam menu buttons. Those used to feel pretty mushy, but now they feel nice. Also, the speakers are louder. The speakers on the LCD model, if I'm being perfectly honest, they were fantastic. I never needed to push them past full volume, but on the OLED, they're even better. Also, the touchpads are more responsive, which is nice if you use those regularly. And to top it off, they shipped it with a longer 2.5 meter charging cable versus the old 1.5 meter charging cable. So that means when you do have to charge the OLED, which is going to be less than the LCD model, you can stay a little bit further away from the wall while you do it. So when you add all these things together, you are getting a dramatically improved device. Valve has gone through and fixed all of my major complaints with the Steam Deck. They fixed the screen, which I thought was pretty bad on the LCD model. They fixed the battery life, which I thought was pretty bad on the LCD model. And they fixed a bunch of other things, which just makes it a more compelling package overall. But we can't look at this in a vacuum. The LCD model does still exist, so let's look at pricing. Right now, they're selling the LCD model for $400, and that's with 256 gigs of storage. So that's actually an improvement from what the base model used to be for $400, and that's the one I bought. But after using both the LCD and OLED model extensively, I really can't recommend buying a new LCD model from Valve. There are just too many improvements that the OLED has that I just can't in good conscience tell you to go out and buy a new one. That being said, I can recommend, if you are very budget constrained, go and buy a used LCD on eBay or from Valve, or get it certified refurbished from somewhere. If you can get a good deal on a used LCD model, I'd say go for it. But if you're not looking to go used, I have to recommend the OLED model. It really is dramatically better than the LCD one. And the baseline OLED, which is what I would recommend, comes in at $550, and that's with half a terabyte of storage. Whereas if you wanted to buy the LCD model with half a terabyte of storage, at least from Valve, that costs $450. So for that extra $100, you are getting so much better of a device. So I would say if you're severely budget constrained, then get a used model off of eBay or off of Valve. But if you have the money, if you've got $550, definitely the OLED is going to give you a way better gaming experience on the go. And again, this is coming from someone, I bet you I put well over 1,000 hours, probably like 2,000 hours on my LCD Steam Deck over the last year or year and a half or however long I've had it. I absolutely love this thing, and I was not expecting the OLED to be this good. If I'm being perfectly honest, I was expecting to buy the OLED, review it, and then probably return it because I didn't think it was going to be that much of an improvement. But it is a huge improvement. Valve has seriously knocked it out of the park with this mid-cycle refresh. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. If you have any questions or you have any specific tests that you want me to run on either of the models or both models together, let me know in the comment section below. And that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching, you guys. I'll see you in the next one.